Hospital Porter's Pride and Dignity. Stop the New World Order. Welcome to HPANWO TV and welcome to this, the read party for the book Voices in the Wilderness by Ron Morehead. Now these read parties are like three-stage affairs, just like the watch parties for movies and TV series, with an introduction, review and live stream. And this is the review section of this particular read party. Now, if you're unfamiliar with this particular project, you need to watch the introduction. It's very simple to do. Go to the link in the description box, watch the introductory video. It's only a short little, as I say, introduction into this particular book. Whoops. And then you can get an idea of what this is all about. This is the review section. There will be one or two spoilers. I'll try to keep them to a minimum, but when you're discussing a book, it's actually pretty difficult. We are doing an intellectual kind of review and discussion of this book. You may wonder why there's a 1970s tape recorder behind me. Oh, well, it'll become very obvious as we go on, because tape recorders, I don't know how many of you are old enough to remember those. They play a big role in this particular project. Now, this book here, this is Voices in the Wilderness. Now, it's an unusual book. It was actually published 2013. And it's self-published as well. Ron actually published this himself. Doesn't have a. It just says it's the second edition of this particular book. You can again look at you can pause and read the back cover if you can see it. But that there is Ron Morehead there. You can just see him there. Now, and it's interestingly, it says here, a true story, second edition, the author and producer of the Bigfoot recordings, volumes 1 and 2. Now, I should point out, I've often stated that the only books in the world that have a soundtrack are Mark Devlin's novels. I've said that several times. It turns out this is not true. This book also has a soundtrack. They're called the Bigfoot recordings. And you can actually, I'm going to play the highlights clip, which is quite well known, and it's pretty much viral. I'll play that on this particular project. I'm not going to play any of the others because they are commercially available. So I think it's fair use to play the highlights clip, but not the actual full repertoire. So what's this about? Well, this is a book about a group of hunters in the United States of America who have some really remarkable experiences, and which I think is open to interpretation, although the author actually does speculate an awful lot about what it might mean. He goes beyond just the regular cryptozoology, because this is usually interpreted as a Bigfoot experience. And indeed, they actually do talk about how many of the people there believe they have encountered some kind of cryptid, which they call Bigfoot, or Biggie for short. There is physical evidence they gather, such as footprints and things like that, although people have accused them of faking those. And eventually Ron's curiosity leads him into other theories. This is what eventually led him into the path of David Paulides, which is where I first heard about all this. So the first thing that strikes me about this book is it's actually quite short. You can read this in about 2 hours. It's actually quite a short book. There's a lot of illustrations in it. It's altogether it's just 126 pages long. Lots of big photos in it though, quite large text. So it's quite a liberally spaced book, and interesting picture on the title page. It was normally it's the title page. Title page recto is the title page verso. That's the title page verso there, which is on the recto for some reason, but there you go. It's a self-published book. It doesn't have to obey the conventions. There's lots of forewords from various people, including Al Berry, the journalist, who played a major role, a close friend of Ron, who sadly passed away in 2012, shortly before this book was published, and played a major role in this investigation. This is, as I said in the introduction, this is a slightly dated book, because it has CD. It says it comes with an accompanying CD, right? Well, unless you were like contemporary with the people who built Stonehenge, you won't know what a CD is. If you're an old git like me, you might just remember them. I don't know if you can think of I don't know, iTunes in a little silver disc. That's basically a CD, guys. Got it, kids? And so that's your CD. That's your CD. But then the back there is like there is the downloads. There's the downloads you have to pay for. Even in this book, it says here you go to ronmorehead.com and you can download the audio tracks that correspond with this. And there's little segments actually in the text where it says play. It says here, like for example, it says quite clearly play audio 3, play soundtrack 2, play soundtrack 3, and it gives you a list. It tells you when to play these soundtracks. So this is a book with a soundtrack, like Mark Devlin's. And interesting quote on the cover. It's from R. Scott Nelson, another major player in this story, cryptolinguist. He's a guy who works for the Department of Defense, deciphering strange codes and languages and stuff. And he says, we have verified that these creatures use language. Yeah. And you can judge for yourself. I mean, there is a question mark over whether this is a purely flesh and blood cryptozoological issue, although it certainly has features of that. For example, we're dealing with creatures that have a physical presence. They leave footprints. They can move things around. But there's a paranormal element accompanying them, something which Jonathan Downes, who's one of the world's top cryptozoologists, he calls it zooform phenomena, something that's like an animal but is not. There's lots of forewords by various people, including there's Tom Powell, who's one of the people involved here. There's a preface. There's Peter Byrne, another colleague of Ron's who worked hard on this. He's actually he's a Bigfoot hunter. He's authored many books about Bigfoot, and at the end there's like a short bio by Rachel, who's Ron's daughter. So there's lots of people contributed to this book. Now, it tells a story about a group of hunters in the great outdoors, and of course this is a big American and indeed Canadian. It's generally a North American tradition, which is outdoor sports and recreation. It seems the country has so much beautiful scenery and so much outdoor things to do and see. Hiking, fishing, camping, hunting. These things have always been big things in the US. Outdoor sports and recreation is like just everyone, I think, does it at some point. And of course, because of the availability of firearms, hunting is really easy to do compared to most other countries. So even though at the beginning of the book, I got the feeling that the author was maybe making an assumption about the cause of the phenomena, it's pretty clear later on he develops new ideas. And so he starts off by talking about the Bigfoot phenomenon in general. He gets one of his friends to do an experiment, a bit like Paul Vella, although not as sophisticated, no LiDAR or anything. He did this in the 70s. There was no LiDAR. But he tries to judge the size of the creature in the Patterson-Gimlin film and concludes, pretty similarly to Paul Vella, that it's extremely tall indeed. And so this guy is he's a Bigfoot believer, and his experiences led him to research Bigfoot, the author. Now, the location where this is, it's actually called Camp Sierra. And it is a highly secretive location. It's kind of like it's a place where it was set up in the 1950s by a group of hunters, and they only allow people they can trust up there. So they don't just take anyone up there; they take their friends and family up there to this Camp Sierra, and that's basically where they can hang out for a while, just sit around the campfire, camp out under the stars, go hunting. Again, this sort of thing is really nice. I've been lucky enough to do these things occasionally, and it is a really lovely thing to do. I've never actually done this. I've never actually been in the outdoors, the great outdoors in the US, but it's something I'd like to do. I certainly would hope to do that at some point. But it's in this beautiful area called the Sierra Nevada. This is a mountain range. There's a lot of places called Sierra Nevada in various locations. Really kind of, it just means snowy mountains. That's what Sierra is, a mountain range, and Nevada means snowy, and they are very snowy in winter. Now the actual location is, like I say, top secret. Only the attendees know about it, and no one gets to attend unless people kind of know who you are, and that sort of thing, and they get to know you. This is actually not far from Yosemite, the Yosemite National Park in the Sierra Nevada mountains, because this is where Paulides was investigating a series of mysterious disappearances. It's actually not too far from Fresno, where I was a few months ago, which is in that kind of area in the Central Valley of California. And So they have this little tradition, every sort of in late summer when the holidays begin, they get in their horses and they go up to the Camp Sierra. Such a lovely, pristine place. They didn't want to spoil it with lots of visitors. And when the Bigfoot issue came along, they were just particularly determined not to allow what they call squatchers, Bigfoot researchers, to go and inundate the place. They thought too many people, it would spoil it. Like a lot of places on holiday where you go off the beaten track, if you tell too many people about it, it becomes a beaten track, basically. So that was their objective in keeping it a secret. And I don't blame them. I don't blame them. So unless you get to know these guys and you earn their trust, they won't let you go up there. Now, he stopped hunting a while ago, but he still goes up there every year. He's an old guy now. He's been going up there since 1971, so it's over 50 years, and he still goes up there every now and again. And indeed, he put David Paulides to this camp. There's some discussion. A lot of people on Reddit are asking where this is, and it seems no one actually knows. And there's some conclusion about where the trail is, how you get up to the camp. I'm not going to repeat that because I don't want to do anything that might destroy, threaten the confidentiality of this particular issue. So that's it. So don't ask me for these things. You can go and look them up. It's a trail to go up there. You can't get a car up there. It's a very, very steep path that goes up to the elevation. It's thousands of feet up, to about 6,000 to 7,000 feet up in the mountains. It's very steep, and it often gets quite muddy and very, very difficult. And there's logs fall over it. And in fact, there were several accidents that Ron reports in the book. Several accidents involving horses falling down and things like that. And he himself suffered some, luckily, minor injuries on that journey. And it takes a number of hours to get to the camp, and you have to do it in daylight, otherwise it gets too dark. And so it's very, very difficult. It's a difficult place to reach. It's not the kind of place you can actually get to very easily, and that's another good thing. I think that's another good thing, because again, you don't want it to get too many people getting up there. You know what I mean? In 1974, he went up there alone, and he says that's not a good idea, because not just because of any strange phenomenon that might be there. It's just, what if you break your leg or something? You won't be able to get out of there. You won't get a mobile phone signal up there. How do you call for help? Because you can't move yourself. The bears would eat you. And they had the camp consists of a stove where they built like a stove thing, which is fueled by a wood fire, and what they call a hutchie, the hutchie is actually a shelter. It's actually a palisade where they sleep inside. Now, I thought this was because of the phenomena. It's actually because it was actually built a little while before the phenomena began, and it's just simply because of bears. They don't want bears to come and hurt them while they're asleep, because the bears will sometimes come into the camp, and they'll try to eat the food and steal the rubbish and things like that. In fact, every time they go up there in the summer, they have to repair the damage done by the bears during the early summer and spring. Unfortunately, in 2014, all the structures there were demolished by the Parks and Forestry officials because they didn't have a license to build them. Now, you're not allowed to build structures in U.S. forests and national parks unless you have planning permission. Even if this palisade it was nothing more than basically a row of cut up logs in a circle held together by a wire connected to trees, and it had a little roof on top of it, which is interesting. So, interesting story about that roof, actually, which I'll go into. So they all began in 1971 when they went up there in August of 1971, and there was Ron and his mate Bill, and there was Warren and Louis, these other guys who went up with them, and there was already some people at the camp who were leaving, and they were terrified. They said, "Something's up here. We're going." And so Bill, Ron, and the others thought, "What the hell? We're not going to worry about that." So they did. They were up there, but then when they were there, they started hearing strange noises and strange phenomena. Odd creatures running around. They found footprints, and when they went up there a little bit later on, they decided to take some tape recorders with them and other things such as cameras, and they recorded this. I'll play it for you. They recorded these strange sounds. I say this is a highlights reel. I'm not going to I'm not going to play for you the full thing. If I can find it, here it is. Have a listen to this. This is very, very weird.
We're in for Nightville.
This sounds like a bit like gunfire. It's actually, this is actually, they've explained it as whatever the phenomenon was. It was banging stones against tree trunks. You know, a lot of people try to whack tree trunks with sticks to try and get some response out of these creatures. And sometimes they whack back. It's maybe one of the ways that they communicate over long distances. There's clearly more than one creature banging the tree trunk, because it's like boom, bang, bang. They wouldn't be able to do that. They wouldn't be able to do that often unless it was more than one creature banging their tree trunks. Ooh. What that's that whooping sound? If you remember in Meadows, I tried to imitate this noise because I was listening to that Bigfoot guy, and the Crafty Narnist made a comedy video of me doing that. Is there any known species that makes that noise in the woods in that area? And this sounds almost like human voices. Oh, that sounds like a bird. Oh, do you hear that? It's like some kind of that sounds like an eagle or something, a bird of some kind. You see, now that the hunters start imitating, they start mimicking the sounds and shouting back at the creatures. I don't know if that's a good idea. I don't know if I do that. But they got used to these sounds very quickly, and Ron concluded actually that he doesn't believe these are harmful. No one was actually hurt in all the time they were there, all the years that this happened, and they really went on for a couple of years. This, and no one was ever harmed. These creatures could easily have attacked if they'd wanted to, and they didn't. That sounds like monkeys, doesn't it? And I mean, Bigfoots are supposedly a species of ape. That sounds like human voices again. It's almost like they're forming words, and you can hear the hunters actually shouting back. It's maybe his way of getting people to know what the words are. It's also a way clarifying exactly what they're hearing. He says it like they're laughing now. Now there's voices that start again, and someone described it sounds like an angry Japanese man. They actually call this the samurai chatter because it does sound a little bit like Japanese. Australia. That's one of the words they say. He actually writes down what he thinks the words might be. Australia or something like that, he says. And it's kind of like and there's several vocalizations that he actually uses, which he thinks they might be. It's like he makes his. It's like he starts with it's Ostros Trio, and then there's another one where he says, you might hear it in a minute. He goes Apala. It sounds like words. It's not any human language, but it sounds like words, and Ron is shouting back at them.
That's right.
Someone's knocking something again. Can you hear that?
I don't know where we went for tracks and all for
You know them whispering there. It seems a bit paradoxical they're whispering to each other, the hunters, when they're shouting back at these things. There's the whooping again. That's just some rubbing against the microphone there. It's more samurai chatter coming up.
Two of them across the creek at the big rocks. It's a hard act to follow.
Hard act to follow.
It sounds like he talks to us and they talk to each other.
Yeah.
They're talking to each other. Samurai chatter. Apala, I said, yeah.
Right there, just seemed moving right through there.
See, it's you could easily imagine, and that's some kind of, that may be some people up there who went up there and just made weird noises to frighten them. You know what I mean? This is, and they tried to get other evidence. So, for example, they tried to get photographs. They even set up camera traps with tripwires and things, and the cameras just wouldn't work. It's weird. It's like this. The phenomenon itself was elusive. You've heard that term elusive before. It's even the title of Christopher Turner's movie, the one he made with Paul Sinclair, Elusive. It's almost like it's trying to avoid detection. Again, a cryptid, if it was just a cryptid, that wouldn't happen. Anyway, they wrote to Ivan T. Sanderson. Now, Ivan T. Sanderson is like one of the pioneers of cryptozoology. Knew Bernard Hovelmans, who Jonathan Downes is always going on about Hovelmans. They're kind of like the pioneers of cryptozoology, and they wrote to this. They wrote to him asking for his opinion. Now he couldn't actually deal with it himself, but then he forwarded the letter to Peter Byrne, who's a local Bigfoot researcher. Now he lived a long way away, and he couldn't actually get there to begin with. He did turn up later, Peter Byrne, but to begin with, like in 1971, he passed the letter then to Al Berry, who's a local journalist, who of course became a major collaborator for Ron, and Ron has a tribute to him in this book because he died shortly before the book was published. And they describe what's also really weird is that there's several other issues which seem to be non-cryptozoological. So, for example, at one point they actually run out. I mean, they got balls, these guys. I'm not sure I'd have done that when you hear those weird noises, but they ran out and tried to chase these creatures, and they say they came up against a force field and they couldn't run any further. They describe it being like something in Star Trek. They came against this force field which stopped them dead in their tracks. Now, they actually mentioned this. It's probably that Sanderson might have given them the idea. Other researchers have also had this experienced this phenomena and have actually described the possibility of what it might be. Researchers like Jackie Tonks, for example, and that is infrasound. Infrasound is a very low frequency sound, too low to hear, but you can feel it in your body. I mean, it's like if you imagine a very, very deep like amplifier you sometimes hear at rock concerts, you actually feel it in your body. And that's infrasound, and it can be used. Lots of animals use it. For example, elephants, blue whales and things like that. They use it. Although elephants and blue whales you normally don't find in that kind of area, and it's possible that they actually do. There's actually this creature, whatever it is, uses infrasound, possibly as a defense mechanism, or indeed to as a hunting method. You can knock your prey down, because infrasound can actually knock you on your flat. It can make you unconscious. It can confuse your thoughts and feelings. It can mess with your brain. So maybe this is what they were experiencing. It wasn't literally a force field. They were hit by a beam of infrasound this creature was giving off. It was actually shouting at them in infrasound. But there's other weird things. They heard what sounded like a tuning fork in the air, and they couldn't find out where it was. No, by the way, I should point out, he mentions in the book, nobody saw a UFO. No one ever saw a UFO in any of these experiences. It's like Ron doesn't want anyone to think he's that crazy, even though what he talks about is actually completely open-minded and the kind of things I talk about. But he mentions metallic clicking sounds, even from inside the camp area. And then they heard, like, what's really spooky is these clicking sounds like went all the way up to the shelter, and they heard them inside the shelter. That must have been well scary. That must have been really scary. And the more they tried to research this, the more elusive it became. As I said, the camera traps failed. Either that or Bigfoot just wouldn't show up when it needed to. And it often used to do strange things. It would steal. Sometimes food would disappear from the camp in a way, not like bears take food. Bears will just rip things open and overturn dustbins and things. But they would literally find as if something with opposable thumbs. He mentions this. A creature with opposable thumbs had literally been picking things up. And but at the same time, it seems to be teasing them. Like, for example, there's one situation where they were on the trail and they see a footprint in the mud. And Ron gets the feeling that the Bigfoot left that print there intentionally to signal to the humans. A very, very clear print in the mud. And I don't know if that's true. But they do other things, like they give them, they used pine cones in the fire to kindle a fire. When you wanted to start the fire up, dry pine cones make a very good way of starting up a fire if you don't have chemicals with you. And the Bigfoot would actually come along and they would give them these pine cones as gifts. They would just leave a pile of pine cones there. And they turned up, right? One of the first things they have to do every summer when they turn up is they have to do some repairs on the shelter, because the shelter inevitably is affected by the weather and things like that through the winter and through the spring. It gets affected because snow will gather on it and collapse the roof. Then it will get wet inside when the snow melts, and it's rain and wind. And so they inevitably have to do a lot of repairs on this shelter. But they turned up, and somebody or something had actually put the roof back on the shelter. They make a roof of it out of various twigs, and it's like the Bigfoot came along and actually put something on the shelter. And they felt perfectly safe. They brought their wives. I mean, Ron brought his wife with him, and his daughter Rhonda went there. He brought his grandchildren. Some of the kids, a lot of them brought kids to the camp, and they felt safe there. They felt safe with these creatures. And what's strange is that there was one incident where a rock was hurled at them, but these rocks, which they do, Bigfoot will sometimes hurl stones at you, but at no point apart from that was there any attempt to do any harm. They never hurt the horses, things like that. And so they were trying to gather this evidence, and they brought Al with them. Now, Al didn't trust them at first. In fact, Al later confessed. Al didn't go hunting with them. He just hung around the campsite where they all went out for the day to try and shoot deer. And while they were away, he searched their rucksacks, and he was a bit guilty about that. But he confessed to them later he'd done that. But he was trying to find. He thought this might be a hoax. He and Peter Byrne had to investigate, and part of that investigation was that they might have uncovered a hoax. And indeed, Ron and his team have been accused of hoaxes. There's people have been suspicious about some of the footprints don't look very authentic, and I thought that actually. I thought some look a bit. Some of them are 18 inches long, and they don't look the right shape. It's possible they were just not cast very well. They're not necessarily faked, but they just didn't. They weren't. These are not professional like Bigfoot hunters. These are hunters of known creatures, which they shoot and kill. But Ron states very, very distinctly he would never try to kill a Bigfoot. He said it's immoral. But in 1976, he had these tapes that he collected, and There was a fire in his house that destroyed the tapes. Now, I don't know if there's anything suspicious about that, because he had this big library of tapes that he recorded up at the campsite, and weren't that bad actually, because he copied them many times. He had as many copies of them by then, you know. And indeed, Al went on to write a book with someone called Anne Slate about Bigfoot in the same year. No, he said no evidence of a hoax was ever discovered. He often thought what he'd like to have found evidence of a hoax, because that would have made it a more interesting story. But he couldn't find any evidence of a hoax, and he spent a lot of time. He went up there many times with Ron and the others. And Ron addresses the moral dilemma of shooting a Bigfoot. He said, well, if you shoot one of the Bigfoot, you get proof. You get physical proof that it exists. Now, I think maybe we'll address this more in the live stream, guys. But firstly, I agree with Ron that it would be unethical to actually shoot a Bigfoot. It would be extremely unethical. But at the same time, if you did end up, for example, if you found a dead one, or you did shoot one by accident or something, strange things start to happen in terms of the government's reaction, which is not unlike the UFO cover-up. What will happen is there'll be a response from the Forestry and Park Services. The FBI will turn up, or someone like that, and they'll just tell everyone to go away, and they'll get rid of the body. It's not unlike the UFO cover-up. It's as if there's a cover-up. There's actually a government cover-up of the existence of these creatures too. And again, that's something I'll leave discussion of that to the live stream. All right, because it's such a rabbit hole. But you know what? I mean, I understand why the government will want to cover up UFOs and aliens. Yeah, I've been through that many times. Why would they not want us to know about Bigfoot? Why would they want to cover that up? That's the question. There were a couple of sightings. In fact, Bill actually saw one first before Ron, but then Ron saw one later on. This is in 1974, because it went quiet for a couple of years. Now, there's no activity after that, and they think the Bigfoot actually just got lost interest, or they might have been a bit just perturbed, because you see, there was an incident where they shot a bear. That a bear was actually in the campsite, and they shot the bear. And they did sort of eat the bear. I mean, they didn't shoot things without. One thing the hunters do is they don't shoot things without eating them. They're not like these horrible big game hunters in Africa who kill lions and things like that. Just pose with them. That's disgusting. But then they all went quiet, and they seemed to go away, the Bigfoots. And then in 1976, it kind of kicked off again after 2 years of quiet, and that's when Bill and Ron actually saw one running away. Now, what happened after that? There was a permanent lull, it seems, but there was a couple of incidents in the 80s and 90s, because he kept going there regularly. But basically, there still are occasional incidents right up to the present day. And he gives some advice on page 66. He says here, if you about this, it's very interesting, some of the advice he gives. He says, if you're lucky enough to see one, don't take your eyes off it, especially if you hear a scream from another direction. That's difficult, but the chances are they're trying to divert your attention cleverly. When you turn around to see what's screaming, the other one will most likely be gone when you turn back, as it will run away. If you hear a tree branch being snapped, don't jump up and down and shine the torch. Just continue what you're doing. They may come closer if they think they don't have your attention. If you hear them chatter, I suggest talking back to them in a calm manner, refrain from aggressiveness. Don't take dogs with you. It's been reported they're frightened of dogs, and they sometimes kill dogs who attack them. Horses are okay. Be sober. Don't drink alcohol. Be cheerful. Wait until some kind of activity has taken place before setting up your camera trap. Take detailed notes, including weather conditions, etc. And so that's the kind of advice. And he also mentions there was this, you may have seen like it's one of these Bigfoot hunting programs on the Discovery or somewhere. Right? They go to this Portlock in Alaska. Now, I might have mentioned Portlock before. I certainly brought it up on Third Rail Radio. Portlock is a town in a remote town on the coast of Alaska, which was abandoned because of attacks by Bigfoot. Now, the Bigfoot what they describe about the Bigfoot in Alaska is very different. It's clearly the same species as the rest of the North American Bigfoot encounters, but it seems to have evolved different behavior. So, for example, in most of the continent, the Bigfoot is very elusive. It's shy. It avoids human contact. In Alaska, where the creature is known as the Nantinak, it's actually very aggressive. And indeed, this fits in with early Amerindian reports of the Sasquatch, that it is actually far more aggressive and forward than it becomes after the population expands. Sometime in the like 13th, 14th century, there was a population boom in North America, which of course increased much more a couple of centuries later with the arrival of European settlers, to the point where today there is like hundreds of millions of people in the continent, and it's become it keeps to its own areas. It stays out of people's way. But in Alaska, it hasn't. And what happens, people in this program, they actually go to Portlock at the dead of night. You might have heard this, and they play these Sierra sounds on the program into the woods to see if they get a response. And Ron says, "Don't play these sounds because you don't know what they might be saying. This could be them. It could be aggressive, or it could be an enticement for a mate or something like that." And on page 72, he starts on the scientific details. This is where this guy Scott Nelson comes into it, and there's several other people mentioned. Several professionals comment on here, such as Dr. Lynn Curlin, who says that she analyzes the tapes and says that its vocal features corresponding to a larger physical size than a man. And she says there's no possibility of a hoax. So it's a he, not a she. And then there's a guy called Joe Hauser who also does an investigation as well, and also comes to the same conclusion. All the people who look into this say that it's real. They don't say that there's a hoax or it's any kind of nonsense like that. And of course, Scott Nelson, who's commented very, very considerably on this, says that it's actually real sound. So, but it's not, he says it's not human. This is something unknown to science. This is not human. I mean, there's people who have accused Ron and Al of like speeding the tape up and doctoring the tapes and things like that. And they say, well, the fire at Ron's house was staged to destroy the original tape, so there's only copies that remain to cover that up, because the original tapes would reveal the hoax. I don't think there's any reason to think that. I mean, fires in houses do happen. They do. And Ron actually asks, are they trying to imitate human languages? Because some animals do that. I mean, he speculated he might hear a few words that he recognized, either from an Amerindian language, or more recently with the arrival of European settlers, there may be some words of Spanish or English among what they're saying. Now, he mentions the case of Kanzi. Now, Kanzi was a bonobo ape who you could actually understand when you spoke to him. Which is, he understands an awful lot of human language. And I mean, some animals do. I mean, dogs can, they say, you've got to be, if you heard the phrase, you've got to be careful what you say in front of a dog, because they can understand a certain amount of human language. Of course, they can't speak, but they can understand a certain amount of human language. And, but he didn't actually learn to speak. He communicated using a symbol board, like pointing at like figures. And if you remember my dolphins reply to Stefan Molyneux video, I talk about Dr. Denise Herzing, who was training dolphins to do the same. But to speak, speaking is actually, you need a specific structure in your mouth and throat, which seems to be unique to humans as far as we know. So Kanzi actually couldn't speak, but his handler, the primatologist Sue Savage Rumble, was very interested in what he said. He could understand up to 3,000 spoken English words and follow complex multi-step instructions, performing at the level of a 2 to 5 year old human child. And he used a symbol board to express various thoughts. And he seemed to acquire these skills spontaneously by observing humans around him. Even though it's clear that he had some kind of concept of what we might call language. Yeah. Now, Scott Nelson actually visited the camp. He listened. He's the guy who thought the tapes were genuine, and he was obviously taking this seriously enough to visit the camp. And with Joe Hauser as well. That's Scott there. There's a picture of Scott. And again, you could play a soundtrack here. I don't have the soundtrack. It's commercially available, so I won't actually report that. You could see this guy's like an American outdoorsman, Ron, because he spends a lot of time describing the horses. He has various horses, which he actually he feels the horses are almost characters in this story, like JR, and there was this mule called Rabbit, they all have their own personalities, and there was Jack and Mo and Maddie, and they have various. He gives them names, and they have like distinct personalities. These horses, and so Scott was also interested in the footprints and things like that. And there were several instances where there were more incidents when he went up there with his wife and daughter, Rhonda. His daughter went up there a lot with him, and where they would hear, very occasionally they would hear noise. So, for example, in 2010 and 2011, there was more chatter. I mean, 2011 he went up there again by then he was quite old, but he went up for a solo trip to the camp, which he said was not a good idea, but he did go back there. And then he starts going. Then Ron starts talking about some very interesting asides where he thinks there may be connections. So he mentions the giants. Now, you've heard about the giants from around the world in Nevada and the Solomon Islands. There's actually a book about the giants of the Solomon Islands, which the author's name is Marius Boyajian or something like that. What's it called? Let's have a look. Solomon Islands giants. Yeah. There's a book, actually, book. Yeah, the Nexus magazine always going on about this book. The Solomon Island Mysteries. And here we are. It's accounts of giants and UFOs in the Solomon Islands by Marius Boyarian. I don't know how you pronounce the name, but it's an unmistakable name, Marius Boyarian. I can't pronounce that name, but anyway, that's the book where they talk about the giants in the Solomon Islands. And you know about I've mentioned this because I wanted to ask the shamans, the Amerindian shamans, the natives who were at the Stairway to the Stars conference. I wanted to ask them about the giants of Nevada, because there's legends of these. They're up to 12 to 13 feet tall. They're humanoid. They're like big people, really, but they actually hunt normal-sized humans for food. It's like cannibalistic, if you consider them the same species, and they're really, really huge. And they found skulls at various places, and indeed, he talks about it in the book. The skulls that were found near Las Vegas in don't know when it was, but they found these skulls, giant skulls, which are twice the size of a human skull. They're in the Smithsonian Institution. And this author believes there's still living giants in the Solomon Islands. How they stay secret, I don't know, and they're that big. And there's this issue with Melba Ketchum. Now, Melba Ketchum, again, I'll maybe say more about this in the live stream, but Melba Ketchum came up with this idea that, just making some notes here, because I've got to remember what I've got to do in the live stream, because I'll put here Melba Ketchum. And what's the other thing I was going to do? There was there's connections. I'll maybe, like I say, talk more about certain things in the live stream. But the language thing and stuff like that. That's a big issue. That is a big issue. We'll go into in more detail, and the cover up as well. We'll cover, and the cover up of bodies, etc. So I'm just getting my notes set up here, because that'll be for the live stream. That's when you guys get involved as well. That's when we have like a kind of like a conflab with you chaps too. So Melba Ketchum came up with this idea that after she studied thousands of forensic samples of hair and other pieces, another Bigfoot DNA that's been collected, she concluded that we're dealing with some kind of hybrid species, a species that hybridized with humans thousands of years ago. So in other words, they were living together and they had children together, which is an incredible idea. But again, that's a big subject that I will maybe go into the live stream. This has been very, very highly criticized. But, there is no doubt that hybrid species do occur. I mentioned rabbit the mule. Well, a mule is a hybrid species of a horse and donkey. One of its parents is a horse, the other is a donkey. And then he goes into the paranormal connection. And I mentioned this in the introduction because he has another book called Quantum Bigfoot. And I always think, I'm against counter-signaling the skeptics. I said this to Richard D. Hall. The skeptics are going to take the piss out of us no matter what we do. And so appeasing them and counter-signaling them is no point. That being said, however, sorry, Slaxer, quantum. If you put quantum with something else in a word, it is kind of like baiting them a bit. It's a bit of a red flag. And you're kind of opening yourself up to ridicule. So maybe there's an element of balance here. The Quantum Bigfoot. It's like people, and this came up at QED, where what was her name? Sabine Hossenfelder. She was given it. Oh, this is quantum, and you put quantum in front of everything. In the old days, they used to put X-ray in front of everything. So it was like X-ray toothpaste, and X-ray boot polish, and X-ray felt. It just sounds scientific. Quantum. You put quantum in front, or quantum in a sentence with the word, or say it's a quantum Bigfoot. It's a quantum broomstick, and that kind of, it just sounds sophisticated and scientific when it's not. At the same time, no, I understand. I know what point he's making, because he, after many, many years of studying this phenomenon and experiencing it, he's concluded that even though there's this paradoxical element, which is, even though they appear to be physical, so this is similar to the aliens actually and the UFOs, they appear to have a physical presence, which would indicate they are a cryptid, an unknown species of animal. Like footprints, as I said, there's hair samples and stuff like that, right? Despite that fact that you have this distinct evidence of that it is a cryptid, there are what you might call zooform phenomena or paranormal phenomena associated with it many times. And sometimes these are ufological. I mean, for example, I mentioned I've mentioned before the Presque Isle sighting. This was an incident where, this was in 1965, where a group of people had both a Bigfoot and UFO encounter at the same time. Even though they saw a UFO in the distance landing, and then a Bigfoot came out the woods. There's no specific physical connection between the two phenomena, but it seems an awfully big coincidence that they would see these two things at the same time. And then there's the glowing rod. Now, Ron doesn't mention this in the book. I was quite surprised. He doesn't bring this up in the book. But there was one instance where they see something that looks like a Star Wars lightsaber just drifting through the woods, very close to them. And I mean, in Missing 411: The Hunted, David Paulides' film, you actually see there's like an animated reproduction of a rendering of what Ron and the others saw. It's just like it looks like a rod of light just floating through the woods very slowly. Eventually, it fades away. And it's bright. It illuminates the rest of the scene. It's like a neon bulb, a neon strip, completely straight, just floating gently at about 4 feet above the ground through the woods, literally just like 20 or 30 yards away from these guys. And this is in the same place where Bigfoot appears. And there's and he says, like, sometimes they come and go, they disappear, they seem to be able to phase in and out of reality. So I mean, even though he uses the word quantum, and maybe that's not a good idea, but I know the point he's trying to make is there is this paranormal connection. Indeed, other people have linked these things, have studied these things associated with UFOs, such as John Keel and Jacques Vallée. And so, what's the connection? What it makes you wonder what. I sometimes wonder when I look into exactly why David Paulides put this in his documentary, because he has an entire 10-minute segment on this whole subject. And I do sometimes wonder why David did that. I mean, because it seems unconnected to the missing phenomenon. I mean, as I said, no one saw a UFO the whole time they were there. No one came to any harm, and no one who's been up to that camp, and only, as I said, only a select few people, a very exclusive little club or cabal of people, even know where that Camp Sierra is. It's in a very remote area. There's no way you'll ever find it unless you're with someone who already knows where it is, because you've got to go up this trail. It's very, very hard going. It's easy to get lost. You have to go with someone who already knows the way. And so you wouldn't find it there. So this again is why it's unlikely some people were making this as a kind of hoax for the campers, because no one would have been able to get there to find it where it is. I mean, they describe it as being the closest to heaven you can get on Earth, and I can well believe it. This beautiful location in the middle of nowhere, but no one has ever disappeared from the camp. And I say everyone knows who goes up there. No one's ever disappeared. No horse has ever disappeared. So there's no connection really between this and the missing 411. So I don't know exactly why Paulides covered it, but he was doing this section on clusters in the area, and he thought he would go into this. Now you see, because he was thought he'd address this issue as well, because these noises, where they come from, we don't know. We don't know specifically that it was actually Bigfoot making these noises. We know they've seen Bigfoot and there's signs of Bigfoot around the area, but the noises might have come from something else entirely. It might have come from some strange paranormal phenomenon. And of course, forests have always had this dark reputation among humans. We've always been scared of forests. This is why we invent fairy tales about little wolves that live in cottages in forests and things like that, and gingerbread houses where little kids get eaten and things like this. All the better to see you with, my dear, that kind of thing. So we're naturally scared of forests. There's that great film, what's it called? The Company of Wolves. It's set in this little village in the forest. If you've not seen that, it's really good. It's like a folk horror movie. It's very good. And indeed, the legends and myths about the forests in North America, these very remote areas, and there's a lot of them in that continent, more so than we have in Britain, where the population is much denser. Stories about people just being snatched out of this world by malevolent supernatural forces is everywhere, and it has been for a long time. In fact, it dates back to pre-Columbian times. And you might see, like L.A. Marzulli. L.A. Marzulli has. You may have seen it, where he captures this image of a portal. I wonder if it's still there, the video. He captures L.A. And there's that almost missing. There's that L.A. Marzulli. I don't know if we can find it here. I mean, it's on his channel. I do recommend this channel, actually, L.A. Marzulli, because he's actually found it here. Portal. Let's have a look. I just got to do a quick search. Here we go. Look, it came through the portal. Is that a camera of the Nephilim?
Fibergel helps break the
show you
cycle
this
of constipation and get you
I've got to put you on screen share anyway as well. So I'll do that. Oh, I'm already on screen share. Yeah.
back to regularity.
Find your groove.
There is a hidden history that's been deliberately obfuscated from the peoples of the world.
Here we go. Look.
Over here on this side of the trail,
I won't play all
of
of
the
this.
day, I'm walking,
But he's
out.
actually walking along through these woods. And he's got a camera on his back facing backwards when he does this. And you see this like portal-like structure appear in the woods, and he thinks that might be like connected. It may be like literally an interdimensional portal, which is pretty scary when you think about it, because it's something. If you want one of the missing 411, this could be the last thing you see in this world before you're taken out of it, which is pretty scary stuff when you think about it. It's disturbing. It's a disturbing subject. But you see, this book here doesn't really go into anywhere that's really too frightening. And, Ron makes it very clear. It surprised me, actually, when I read it. Ron makes it very clear there's nothing that he considers malign about whatever he was encountering. He wasn't scared to bring his kids there. The others weren't scared to bring their kids up there to try and experience it too. But who knows? I mean, maybe maybe there's more to this. I don't know. Maybe there's more to. I know Ron has been doing this. He's been doing the conference circuit. He's been all over the world. He's actually an adventurer. He travels to all over the world looking into various creatures. He's become like almost a full-time cryptozoologist now. He looks for tigers in Nepal and things like that. And he's been to look for the Yeti. He's been all over Russia looking for the Almasty. He's spoken at various conferences, in Bigfoot conferences. He's spoken at paranormal conferences. He's spoken in Russia. He's been to Russian conferences. And he talks about the connection to the Paracas skulls. He didn't mention it, but I thought about the long skull people that Maria Wheatley talks about. Again, it may be Melba Ketchum has a point, and there is like various offshoots of human beings that maybe they do interbreed with various different species, and they end up producing new species. They speciate into different kind of into different elements of the creatures, you know. So it's really interesting. This is interesting sort of stuff. It's quite funny at times. Like they got this, like they call the throne, which is their toilet, which is just a hole in the ground with a toilet seat on it, which they use for dumping their stuff. They dump in their poo, and they just, and at the one point, the Bigfoot actually starts playing around with that and slamming the toilet up and down. It's the toilet seat up and down. It's a strange. They're strange like that. I mean, I don't know what would be the attraction of a bunch of shit, but that's what they did. And he wonders if they are like self-aware, whether they have an intelligence on the level of humans. I mean, I think, you know, self-awareness, of course, is a very, very difficult thing to judge. I mean, because when I did my video about artificial intelligence, I made the point that it's actually impossible to know whether anything else is self-aware or not, because AI is designed to mimic conscious interaction with humans. So therefore, you know, you may not know. And indeed, when it comes to other animal species, it's quite likely they have a consciousness like we do, even if they don't have our intelligence. Oh, but we don't know that. We don't even know if other people are conscious. I swear some of them, the NPCs, you know, they're not. But what is Bigfoot? I mean, is it actually a form of creature that is similar to ourselves in terms of intelligence and sentience? Or is it just like a big bonobo? That's a good question. But anyway, it's over to you guys, because what I'll do in a little while is I will we'll do the live stream and the third and concluding part of this read party for Voices in the Wilderness by Ron Morehead. In the meantime, thank you all of you for watching HPANWO TV. Hospital Porters, Pride and Dignity, stop the New World Order.